Over this term, we are going to be looking really at the story of God's faithfulness to us over the years, over 135 years. And there's no better place to start than the beginning with JB's slide. So Matthew, over to you in this great setting.
And it always surprised you to know I wasn't there over 130 years ago when the church began. So I'm going to be relying largely on this book, which is called 100 Not Out. This was published in 1989 to mark the centenary of our church. And much of what I share will come from there. And you'll see a picture here between us. This is John Bertram Slight and his wife Emma. You might recognise the picture. It's normally just on the wall by the door at the front of the main hall with a plaque underneath it. And they were really integral to the beginning of our church. John Bertram Slight, JB Slight, and his family were part of Kirkgate Wesleyan Methodist Chapel in the late 18th century. That was in the centre of Bradford, roughly where the Kirkgate shopping centre is today. And it was a thriving, prosperous church. You know, the book talks about people coming across town in their horse and carriages and getting out in all their finery. But within half a mile from that church was the Sunbridge Road area of town. And back then that was an area really of slum housing, back-to-back housing. There was a lot of poverty and drunkenness and lawlessness. And there was a small group from that Methodist church in town who had a heart to go and share the gospel, to go and preach Christ. And JB Slight was the leader of that group. He had an interesting upbringing. He was from quite a wealthy family, but he had a lot of medical concerns as a child, heart issues. And so doctors said he wouldn't be able to work. So he really devoted himself to the Lord's work. And, you know, as that group shared the gospel, the outreach was blessed. And they realised pretty quickly they needed a venue so that they could invite people into services. Initially, they rented a hall on the bottom of Dyson Street that seated 100 people. You know, even at that stage, JB Slight paid the rent, furnished the room. But as the work grew, they looked for a permanent home. I think today we would call this a church plant, but back then the language was of a mission hall. So his father bought the land that we're sitting on now, which was unused at that time, for 500 quid. It'd be nice if things cost that much today, wouldn't it? A building committee was formed, which all sounds very familiar. And initially they built this hall and an infant's room. And the foundation stone for that was laid on Monday the 18th of March, 1889. And the building continued to grow, so 10 years later, 6 adjacent cottages were purchased, and they were kind of knocked through, modified, remodeled for use with smaller rooms. And then sometime later in 1935, some more cottages became vacant. And again, JB Slight provided the funds to buy those, and that became what is now the lounge and the rooms above it. So JB and Emma Slight really, were really used by the Lord in the formation of this church. They poured their lives, their resources into Sunbridge Road Mission in quite a remarkable way. And under their leadership, the church was established, and many people, in this community were blessed. There's one quote in the book where he says, "The more money I give to the Lord's work, the more He sends me." He really invested generously in the ministry here. And right from the beginning, our church has been a church with a heart for Bradford. There was a mission to share the good news of Jesus with the lost, and a desire to bring the love of Jesus to a difficult part of town.
Matthew, thank you for sharing that. And it's been amazing, it is amazing to hear of how God put that on his heart and that vision on his heart. And we do look forward over this term to sharing more stories of God's faithfulness. So thank you for joining us.